So just a quick note on this video before we get into part 2 of this massive tank dent repair. If you haven't seen the first video that I did, check my channel there. There's another video, the initial sort of dent removal and filling and dealing with that part of it. That seemed to be a pretty big hit as far as the number of folks that watched that and commented on it. So very much appreciate everybody that looked at that video, and take a look at that before you take a look at this one. Maybe I'll try and put a link somewhere that you can see that one as well. So yeah, check out the first video before you watch this. So I had a heck of a time this time getting a perfect match on this in just a regular base clear. Every sort of, I'll call it exact color match, or super close color matches that I found were all tri-coats, which I'm desperately trying to stay away from. So I got what I think is the closest one I can, which is in here. I guess if I stir it up a little bit, you can kind of see the pigment kind of changes a little bit. So, but just to it's a little darker than the original one, and you know, my buddy's not too fussed about that particular concern. I think I'm more concerned about it than he is. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to spray a little bit of it with my gun here, just so I can satisfy myself that it's a close enough match, and then we'll see how it looks. We're just going to warm up this decal so we can strip it off and start prepping the side panels. Alright, there's the decal stripped off. There's really no magic around this process. It's just heat gun, heat the plastic. Obviously don't overheat it so it warps, but just heat it enough to soften the adhesive, and then it's just a scraper, and try to be careful not to nick the plastic and underneath and all that kind of thing, because then you're just repairing it. I think I've showed you this before. I've tried pretty much everything as far as the removal of this adhesive goes, because as you can see, the adhesive is everywhere and it doesn't come off with the decal very well. And for me, by far the best product is isopropyl alcohol. So I just like to just dribble it on there, spread it around, let it soak into the adhesive a little bit, put some more on. Some people use WD-40. I don't like that, especially when it's something you're going to paint again. Goo Gone, I've used that before. It's okay, but it doesn't work half as well as alcohol does. So just, yeah, spread it on, rub it in with your finger. That's what I do. And then just keep going at it until it looks like the alcohol is not getting soaked up as quickly into the adhesive. And then you just take your razor blade scraper and then it just scrapes right off. And the longer you leave the alcohol to soak, the easier this stuff just comes right off. So it works really good, and then you end up with this big sticky glob of goo. So yeah, that's how I do it. So the one thing I will warn about using the alcohol is I would only recommend using isopropyl alcohol to strip the adhesive off if you're doing it to repaint a panel. If you're just stripping it off and you're going to put a new decal on and you want to make sure that the paint itself is unaffected, I would just use a milder product like a Goo Gone, or sometimes WD-40, but especially something like a Goo Gone, because that's exactly what it's for. The downside with the alcohol is on some decals and adhesives, the way that it actually bonds to the paint, it tends to kind of the adhesive gets embedded in the paint or the clear coat or whatever. So once you start putting the alcohol on it, it tends to really soften that top layer of clear coated paint, and it can just shave the clear coat right off the panel, which is kind of what you see happening here. So that's clear coat that's just kind of come away because it got softened so much with the adhesive sticking to it, I guess, and then the alcohol just kind of lifting it out. So just something to be aware of. If you're just stripping off decals and you're just going to put new decals on and you don't want to damage the paint, then the alcohol is not necessarily the way to go. I'm going to use as I said, a milder product like Goo Gone to do that. So just a word of warning. Okay, so just to answer a few questions and comments that were in the previous video for the Ascot VT500 tank that's going to be going to paint. Here's the answers to those comments and questions. And yeah, if you got any more comments or questions, put them in the comments below. I do appreciate all the feedback. So here's the tank after I've kind of done my repairs on it. There was a number of questions around how come I didn't fill it with water and pressurize it to pop it out. The short answer to that is I don't find that method particularly quick or maybe as effective when you've got a hard crease in the tank. It might have pulled out some of it. I don't know. It's not a method I've really tried. I think I tried it once, not more than once anyway. And I think as I explained earlier, if you have kind of a nice smooth dent in a large area, then popping that stuff out, whether it's with air pressure or whether it's with a dent puller or whatever, seems to be a lot easier. Than when you've got a hard line, sharp crease in something, it tends to take a lot more effort to get it back out. So maybe in the future I will try again with the air pressure and the water and the hydraulic pressure and whatnot. I did not do it in this particular case. I was asked about how come I didn't use pin pullers, weld them on. I don't have one of those tools to do that. I think I explained that in the videos, which is why I was using the pull tabs with the glue. Another question that came up was, why didn't you take all the paint off before you used the glue pull tabs? Well, this is just my experience. And my experience has told me when there is no paint on the tank, the glue does not seem to hold as well as it does with the paint. Sure, if you got some issues with a sharp crease like I had, excuse me, forgive my voice, I'm recovering from a cold, then sure, it can splinter the paint off if the paint has suffered some damage in the denting process. But the whole principle behind PDR paint tools and pullers, even though in this case I was repainting it, but the whole principle is you glue that stuff on directly onto the paint and you can pull dents out without having to repaint. If it's on a car, as a door or a fender or whatever, or in some cases a tank, you can pull the dent out, without having to repaint. That's the whole point of PDR tools. So in my case, I just, used it as a PDR tool, but knowing full well I was going to have to repaint it anyway. And as I said, I have tried on a number of occasions to do it on bare metal, and maybe it's the glue that I'm using. And I just bought some new glue sticks, so it's something I can try and see if it works any differently with different glue. But it does not adhere as well to bare metal as it does to the painted surface. So that's, again, just my experience. Other people's experience may differ. I'm not a professional. I'm just monkeying around in the workshop, doing the best I can, and I can only tell you what has or has not worked for me in any particular circumstance. The other comment was, you could have taken more of the dent out, and now you've turned it into, I think the words were Bondo bucket. I would say that more than 90% of that dent was pulled out, and there was only a dent about that wide, and the maximum was 2 millimeters deep in the center, and it kind of went to like less than a millimeter here and less than a millimeter there. So it was a very thin band. And as I said at the beginning, my objective was to have less than 1/8 of an inch you know, less than 2 millimeters of filler in this tank. Don't want any more in there than that. And so, you know, people wonder then, well, why did you put the filler over the whole area as opposed to just in the middle? Well, the simple answer to that is if you want a nice smooth transition, then then you put the filler over the entire a much larger area, and then sand it all back, and then you're much less likely to have, you know, a ridge or a visible place where the filler is and the metal is. And the other reality with a dent that large is there could be slight waves and fluctuations in the metal. So by filling the entire area and then sanding it back, anywhere outside of that kind of dented area that was kind of left in the middle, there's practically no body filler at all. It's just a very, very microscopic, that's probably exaggerating, but, you know, fraction of a millimeter of filler, but you get a much smoother and kind of flatter finish on the panel. The same idea, I guess, is when the guys that do these custom car paint jobs and bodywork, they will fill the entire panel, every panel on the car, and block the whole thing to get that thing dead straight. Even if there's no visible dents, they still block everything and fill everything and block it just to get it as best as it can be. And so the similar principle, I guess, here is just to fill it and then sand as much of it off without hitting the metal underneath. Or if you hit the metal, then you kind of stop, because now if you hit metal, then now you're going to start seeing waves appear in it. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And the other reason that I didn't pull that dent out any further was I also didn't want to create the opposite problem, where because the metal would have stretched so badly on a hardline crease like that, I didn't want to end up pulling that thing out to the point where the tank pulled out further than it should have, given that the metal had stretched in some way, shape, or form. So if I was a better dent puller, body man, or whatever, maybe I would have tried to do that, but I'm not. I know my limitations. I know the skills that I do and don't have. And so I wanted to stay within my comfort level and just kind of take it to a point where I was comfortable putting a very thin smear of filler in it. There is the rationale for that. So thanks for the feedback and the comments. Those are my answers. And as I've said 1,000 times before, I am not a professional. This is something that I do as a fun hobby in the workshop. And I'm doing what kind of works for me. I do have a good friend whose paint booth I use, who has given me countless hours of tutelage on this whole thing. And so, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with the way things are going. But, you know, you're never too old to learn something new. So I do appreciate all the comments. And I hope you enjoyed the answers to those comments and questions. So just to kind of show you a little bit about what I do when I'm prepping these panels for paint. Again, I'm not a professional. This is just what I've been taught to do and what works for me. So before I start sanding anything, I've already done part of this panel. But before I started sanding, I clean the whole. Actually, the first thing I do is this has got brake cleaner in it. I clean the whole thing with brake cleaner inside and outside, and then I go over it with this stuff, wax and grease remover. And the reason I do that is I don't want, if there's any silicones or oils or greases or waxes or anything on this thing, I don't want that stuff, those contaminants, to get ground into the surface with the sandpaper that I'm using, because then I'll get all kinds of issues when I go to put primer or paint on it and whatnot. So first step is basically just clean the panel as much as possible, get all the contaminants off it, and then I can start sanding it. So I'm sanding it at the moment with 320. That way I can prime it, and then I'll go over it with 400 after that. But yeah, basically it's just making sure that there's no shiny spots left anywhere. So the hardest parts are these short sections, right? Because then it's easy to get the center part of it, but right there, the edge, see where my thumb is there, you can see that it's shiny. So you can't leave any shiny stuff anywhere. I just keep going over it and going over it and going over it until there's no shiny stuff left. There's a little bit of shiny stuff right there. So, yeah, we'll see, a little bit of shiny stuff. So I just keep going over it. Get it as flatted back as I can, and then anywhere where I hit kind of bare ABS plastic, like there, that's going to get primer for sure. Some panels I'll prime the whole thing. Others I'll just use the existing paint as a substrate if it's in good shape. But I always like to prime any of the bare spots. And although I've never used it, my buddy who's the pro painter tells me making sure that your bare plastic is covered over with a primer when you're using waterborne paint. I've never used waterborne, but he does. He said it's critical because waterborne paint, unlike solvent-based paints, apparently it won't adhere to the ABS plastic properly unless there's a primer on it. It just almost like pulls away, it just kind of pulls back, and it won't cover on the areas where there's exposed ABS plastic. So it'll stick to the paint here, but then it'll just kind of pull away, kind of like pissing on the toilet seat almost, you know. Yeah, you just got to make sure that there's no exposed ABS plastic. But that's not going to be a problem for me because I'm not using waterborne paint. I'm still using solvent-based paint. All right, so all the Honda Ascot stuff is mounted. Everything's been, I just kind of blew it off at the airline. It's had the final degrease and panel wipe done, and it's all been tacked off. So it is ready to paint. Let's get after it. All right, first coat of color is on. I'll let that dry for about 8 to 10 minutes. We'll see how fast it dries off. We'll give it one more coat. And as long as you got good coverage, then we can hit the clear. All right, second coat is down. Looks pretty decent. Still wet, it's not dry enough yet, but I think I see a little bit of a light spot on the tank right there, where you can see actually the outline of a Honda wing right there. So I think we're going to go one more coat on it, for sure on the tank. And there's a couple little spots, dark spots on the top of the fender where there was a rub through. So I think I'm going to give the fender one more shot. The tail looks good. And the two side panels look good. So one more coat on the fender, one more coat on the tank, and we should be good to go. So I think I explained briefly in one of the other videos that from the Honda factory, these were actually I'll call it like an old school tri-coat. I'm not sure they actually do tri-coats the way they used to at Honda. So it used to be, there was a silver base coat, and then over the top it was like a transparent candy red that went over the top, and that kind of gave you the metallic effect. The tri-coats now I think are a little different. Tri-coat for this, for instance, would be like a red base, and then there's like a translucent, I don't know what you would call it. It's not really like a pearl per se, but it's the same sort of idea. You can actually see right to the bottom of the can pretty much, and you put that over the top. So it's not the exact color that it was originally, but here's the difference. For a sprayable quart of this, $40 Canadian. For a sprayable quart of an equivalent tri-coat, $600 Canadian. So for a kind of small time hobby, put a fresh coat of paint on a bike, you know, you have to avoid the tri-coat in my view, because I don't think anybody would want to pay $600 a quart for that kind of a product. When you're painting and matching a panel on a car, that's a whole different issue. You really don't have much choice. But in this kind of scenario where you're repainting everything, and you know, my buddy is happy with going with this color, it just doesn't make economic or viable sense to spend that kind of money on a quart of paint, or even a pint of paint at, you know, $300 a pint. It's just madness. All right, so 2 coats to clear. She looks pretty darn good. There's a little speck of something right there in the tank, but that's not a problem because the whole tank has to get wet sanded anyway before the decals go on and before it comes back for another couple of coats of clear on top of that. I did have a mishap, I gotta be honest. Let me get it. So right there, you can't really see them, but there's a couple of very slight runs there. And yours truly, the idiot, didn't have the lid on the paint gun properly, and it popped off and splashed the tank a little bit. But as I said, the whole thing has to get wet sanded anyway before the decals go on. But generally speaking, I would say I'm pretty damn happy with that. Looks good. Everything laid down really nice. All right, VT500 Ascot decals. This one is a little trickier, only because it's a much larger decal, and the larger the decal, typically the trickier they can be. In my experience, other people may have a different experience with it, but you know, this is what I'm finding. So the first job is to get it positioned where I want it to be. All right, so I've changed the place that I want to hinge this. This section of the panel seems to be kind of larger and flatter, so I think if I hinge it at the bottom and lay it down this way, I think I might be a little bit more successful. We'll see how that goes. I have my Barbie hairdryer here. Why do I use a Barbie hairdryer? Well, it's very easy to overheat decals, and there's very little chance of that happening with a Barbie hairdryer, right? They don't want kids burning themselves. So this thing is only probably about 25 years old, so my daughter doesn't use it anymore, so I might as well. All right, so first step is to basically peel off the backing. And the reason I like to get that done first is I find that if you get this backing paper wet when you're laying decals down with a soap and water solution and a bit of alcohol like I am, this backing paper here, once it gets wet, it tends to stick to the back of the decal, and once that happens, it becomes a real pain and a real mess. So now the professionals typically don't put decals down wet, but I'm not a professional, so the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way out and upwards, squeezing out any of the water and the air bubbles at the same time. And I'm leaving this edge here up a little bit. I'm not letting it lay down yet, because if I don't like the way this starts to lay down as I get over this little body line here, then it makes it easier for me to potentially lift this thing back up and lay it down again in a better way. Now, before I get too excited here, I'm going to heat this up a little bit. The heat just makes the decal a little bit more compliant. Lets it form a little bit better. If you're doing this with a regular hairdryer, I would suggest just being careful with how much heat you apply. And I would also recommend not using a heat gun. Don't use a heat gun. It's pretty easy to ruin the decal with a heat gun. And when you get a bit of a wrinkle or a pucker like I have right here, if you can see that right there, what I don't want to do here is just push that straight down, because that's when you end up getting a wrinkle in the vinyl. So what I want to do is I want to try to come across that this way once I've warmed it up a little bit. And that increases my chances of success, although, like I've said before, I'm not a pro. I'm just an idiot in the workshop. Again, as usual, the whole tank has been wet sanded with 600, so that way when we go back to the paint booth for clear coat, I can spray over top of the decal and over the whole tank again and get proper adhesion. So these two here are just basically marking the front border and from the bottom up as far as the location of the decal goes. And yeah, so basically it'll just be the usual hinge that, give it a squirt with some water after I peel the backing off, and we'll go from there. And then I'll basically just do exactly the same thing on the other side. Not bad, not bad at all. It's good. All right, let's take a look at these tanks with the clear coat on them. This is the first time I've been in after I've sprayed it. I like to come in a few minutes later just to make sure that everything is good and there's no issues. So that Ascot tank, that looks good. Looks really good. All right, so thanks very much for watching the video series. These two videos on the Honda Ascot bodywork, and especially the tank Dent Repair that I did. Thanks to everybody that watched that first video. That was the most popular video I've ever done. Why, I don't know, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I think I got about 35,000 views in the first week, which was incredible. I don't think I've ever got 35,000 views in a year on a video, let alone in a week. So thanks for that, everybody who commented and gave me the thumbs up, and maybe a few folks subscribed as a result of that. So it's all very much appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the second video and the final results that I got. Again, not a professional, just kind of doing my best here in the workshop with what I have. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more. Thanks.